Hi, Chandra. Your scales look great. Um, let's see, little tiny things, in shades between the first and second blocks. Is there a big jump there? Is there more jump in interval than there is elsewhere in the scale? And I'm looking at the grayscale version, and I think it's possible for the tone scale to be more constant in value. Now, for your gradation of hue, well, let's take a look at the circle with a red to yellow gradation. That one is actually correct. The issue with the others is that the colors are not all fully saturated. Your gradation of value looks great, and so does your gradation of saturation. Julie, you do have the concepts here with the scales. There are a couple of things I want to talk about, though. It might be that your first blocks there at left are not all precisely the same, but they are very close. Your rightmost blocks are all correct. Uh, there is some variation in hue. Notice that you start with a cyan at the left and you wind up with greens toward the center. So you should have constant or fixed hue. I do see some fluctuation with value in the tone scale. Now, looking at your gradation of hue, this is quite good. It could be that your colors could be fully saturated. The value gradation is okay, and the gradation of saturation is correct with constant value. I request that you remove stroke on your designs until we get to week 5. Hi Lucretia, your scales look good. Perhaps there could be more constant value in tones. Notice that there's a jump from the first block to the second one. In gradation of hue, most of your colors are saturated except the violets. However, it's not a gradual transition here, which is the definition of a gradation. You do have that, though, in the gradation of value and the gradation of saturation. Both of those look pretty good. I'm going to encourage you to practice making perfect circles. Hi Trina, I'm going to go back and look for your scales. Either they didn't download when I tried, or perhaps they weren't named properly. If that's the case, please go back, rename the file, and post it again. Now, your gradation of hue is correct, and the gradation of value looks good too. The best of these is the gradation of saturation. That's a really exciting design. Value is mostly constant, could be more constant, but this is quite close to exactly what's being asked for. Hi Christina. Looking at your scales, I can see that you have the concepts down. One thing to check on is the R, G, and B values for the leftmost boxes. They should be identical. When I take a look at your work in the grayscale mode, it looks as though the tone scale is not exactly constant in value, and that goes also for your gradation of saturation, though it is pretty close. Now, looking at your gradation of hue, gee, that has fairly constant value, I notice. The colors are nearly saturated. They are not fully saturated, though. The gradation of value is technically correct, but I've asked people to work with hue here versus neutrals. Hi, Starlet. Your scales look good. I'd like you to double check the R, G, and B values in the leftmost boxes, and let's take a look at tones between the leftmost box and the next one. Perhaps is there too much of a jump in interval? I'd like you to take a look at the value in the tone scale. It might be that it could be more constant. Looking at your gradation of hue, things look perfect here. This is a lovely design. Gradation of value and gradation of saturation are also good. Hi Jamie, your skills show understanding of the concepts. I'd like you to pay closer attention to the directions though, because you're being asked to use the same color for each scale. Now, I'd like you to double check your RG and B values for the white, black, and gray. With white, all three should be 255. With black, they should all be 0. And with gray, they should all be the same, somewhere between the black and the white values. Now for gradation of hue, what you want are all fully saturated colors. Notice that there are some tints here, so they don't really belong. A gradation is a gradual transition, so this one should look something like a rainbow or part of one. I think with your gradation of hue, you are pretty close. Notice that there are some greenish colors that are actually shades of yellow. In this case, you have a green hue and a yellow hue, so that means that your hue is not fixed or constant. With your gradation of saturation, things look very good. This is a subtle effect. Hi Chastity, your gradation of hue here looks good. The colors are saturated. There is room for them to be a little more saturated still. Now the gradation of saturation there in the center looks good. It's possible that value could be just a little more constant, and your gradation of value looks just fine. You probably submitted your scales, but I'm not seeing them here. Perhaps they didn't download correctly. I'll go back and look for them. Or maybe the file wasn't named correctly, and if that's the case, I'd like you to rename it and post it again, and then I'll grade it for you. Hi Amy, your scales look pretty good. Notice that the assignment is asking you to work with the same color for each scale, however. Now, I'm wondering, is there a little bit of gray in your shade scale? With shades, you want to progressively add more and more black until you end in black itself. With tones, your final square should be a true gray, a neutral color with R, G, and B values all the same. Now, let's see, with your gradation of hue, you've got the idea. In fact, this is a gradation of hue, but the assignment is also asking for fully saturated colors only. So where you have tints, that's not meeting the assignment. With your gradation of value, things look okay, but remember you are being asked to keep hue constant, so there should be only one hue and a variety of values in this composition. I see what you're trying to do with your gradation of saturation. However, I would recommend that you stay with flat color shapes along the lines of what you see in the assignment examples. When you take a color and make it progressively more transparent, that does change the saturation appearance, but it's very hard to maintain constant value with that. Hi Nat, your scales look quite good. The only little problem I see here is there is gray in tints, so you should be adding more and more white, but not any gray as you proceed toward the white at the right end of the scale. Looking at your gradation of hue, the colors are somewhat saturated, but they're not fully saturated. I'm wondering if there's a chance you could be working in CMYK mode instead of RGB. The colors will look duller in CMYK. Your gradation of value looks okay, and the gradation of saturation looks pretty good too.